Perfeito. Abaixo está a versão em inglês, muito mais sombria, em formato de história vivida, sem numeração, sem lista, sem estrutura documental. É narrativo, psicológico, arqueológico no tom, como se alguém tivesse estado lá e estivesse contando algo que talvez não devesse. Está pronto para a gravação em voz dark. They told us it was just a trench, a depression in the ocean floor, a geological feature, a place measured in meters and mapped in grayscale. But when the sonar first returned the anomaly, no one in the room called it a trench. They called it a chamber. I was there the night the image came through. We had been scanning the Pacific for weeks, stitching together the dark with sound. Most of the time the returns were predictable. Slopes, ridges, sediment drifts collapsing into each other like frozen waves. Then the signal flattened. The drop became vertical. Too vertical. And at the bottom of that vertical fall, the sonar didn't scatter the way it should have against loose sediment. It hit something broad, enclosed, almost architectural. Someone laughed and said it looked like a room. No one laughed again after the second scan. The shape repeated. A vast hollow carved into the planet's skin, deeper than Everest is tall, sealed beneath 7 miles of water. The Mariana Trench. That's what the reports call it. But reports don't capture the feeling of watching a machine descend into a place no human body could survive for a single second. The submersible dropped for 4 hours. 4 hours of falling through black water. At 1,000 meters, sunlight was gone. At 3,000, the hull began to creak under pressure. At 6,000, even our strongest lights seemed weak, swallowed before they could travel. And when the vehicle finally touched bottom, the camera flickered. For a moment, we thought we had lost it. Then the image stabilized. The first thing we saw was movement. Not rocks, not empty sediment. Movement. Shapes drifting just beyond the beam, pale and almost translucent, like organs floating in formaldehyde. One of them turned toward the light. It had eyes large, dark, reflective. A snailfish, later identified as Pseudoliparis swire, a creature not supposed to exist at 8,000 meters. Its body looked unfinished. Soft, gelatinous, boneless in appearance. Under that pressure and over 1,000 times what we feel at sea level, bone becomes a liability. Structure collapses. Air compresses into nothing. So this life form had abandoned rigidity altogether. It survived by yielding, by becoming almost fluid, and it was not alone. The sediment began to ripple. Thousands of amphipods surged across the floor like insects disturbed beneath a stone. They crawled over one another, into the light, over the camera housing itself. We had expected scarcity. We found a city, not built with walls or towers, but built with metabolism. Every inch of that so-called room was alive. Microbial mats covered the sediment in films invisible to the naked eye. Genetic analysis later revealed entire branches of life never catalogued before. Bacteria and archaea thriving in chemistry that would poison surface organisms. It wasn't an empty abyss. It was an ecosystem sealed away from the sun for millions of years. And then someone zoomed the camera. Half buried in the sediment, just beyond a cluster of crustaceans, was something that did not belong. At first it looked like a shell. Then the edges sharpened, straight lines, a curve too smooth, plastic, a fragment of something manufactured, possibly part of a container, possibly part of fishing equipment. It had traveled 10 kilometers downward through currents, storms, and time. It had reached the deepest place on Earth. Later, sediment cores confirmed what the camera suggested. Microplastics were embedded in the mud, not scattered randomly, layered, mixed into the geological record, as if the planet had begun to swallow our waste and archive it. But that was not the most disturbing discovery. Weeks after the expedition, isotope analysis came back from the lab. Certain amphipods carried radioactive signatures consistent with mid-20th century atmospheric nuclear testing. The fallout from detonations decades ago had risen into the sky, circled the globe, settled into the ocean, merged with plankton, sunk as marine snow, and finally arrived here, in the chamber, in the tissues of creatures that had never seen light. The deepest ecosystem on Earth carried the chemical memory of the nuclear age. It was no longer just a geological depression, it was an archive. And like any archive, it could be altered. Geologists reminded us that the trench itself was born from violence. One tectonic plate sliding beneath another, the crust folding and sinking into the mantle. Earthquakes ripple through it. Sediment avalanches bury entire sections without warning. Mud volcanoes exhale mineral-rich plumes from below. The floor shifts. Slowly. Relentlessly. Nothing there is stable, except what we leave behind. Hydrophones lowered into the water column recorded low, resonant pulses. For a time, no one could explain them. The frequencies were irregular, almost mournful. Eventually, they were matched to deep-diving beaked whales, massive mammals descending into darkness we barely understand. Their presence meant the chamber was not isolated. It was connected to the surface world by sound, by food, by migration. A slow snowfall drifts constantly into the trench. They call it marine snow, dead plankton, fecal pellets, organic debris. Each particle a fragment of the world above. It feeds the chamber, but it also carries everything else. Plastic fibers, industrial chemicals, metal residues. The room beneath the ocean does not close its door. It receives whatever falls, and now there are plans to open it further. Beneath the sediment lie polymetallic nodules, rounded stones rich in manganese, cobalt, nickel. Materials critical for batteries, for electronics, for the infrastructure of a modern civilization. Corporations are designing machines that could descend, scrape, harvest. Governments negotiate through the International Seabed Authority, drafting frameworks to regulate extraction beyond national borders. Some call it progress. Others call it irreversible damage, because xenophyophores, giant single-celled organisms that build fragile lattice structures across the mud, take decades to form. Because certain amphipods coat their bodies in mineral layers drawn from the water itself, a biological armor formed through chemistry we barely understand. Because microbial communities capable of degrading hydrocarbons under crushing pressure might be altered by disturbances we cannot predict. This is not a barren wasteland. It is a functioning system, and we are considering mining it. When I look back at the first sonar image, I still see a room, a space enclosed not by walls but by pressure, a chamber beneath the ocean that was never designed for lungs, for fire, for machines. We entered with cameras. We left with data. And now we debate returning with extraction tools. The most unsettling part is not what lives there. It's how quietly it receives us. No protest, no barrier. Just sediment parting beneath mechanical arms. If we scar that floor, the marks will remain for centuries. If we stir those sediments, chemical archives millions of years old will disperse. If we decide that the deepest chamber on Earth is merely another resource deposit, the record of that decision will settle into the mud like every other trace we have left. Plastic, isotopes, metal. When future scientists descend again, decades, perhaps centuries from now, they will read the layers. They will see exactly when we opened the door. And they will know that the room was never made for us. The only question is whether we learned that in time, or whether we mistook silence for permission.